When his friends heard it, they went out to seize him, for they said, "He is insane."
Oh, man.
You are stepping into the absolute flashpoint of Mark chapter 3. Today, we're taking your notes and stripping them down to the real mechanics of rebellion. I mean, the biggest revelation of this deep dive is that Jesus is deemed so dangerous in this text that the two most bitterly opposed political factions in Galilean politics actually, well, they team up to destroy him.
Yeah, and if that isn't shocking enough, his own family attempts to place him under house arrest.
Right. And by the end of this text, Jesus publicly severs his blood ties in a culture where doing so equaled total social death. Our mission today is to unpack the traps, the intense political tension, and the family drama present in this explosive text. We are exploring how Jesus doesn't just navigate these threats, he actively escalates the conflict at every single turn.
It really is a masterclass in escalation. I mean, if you read carefully, you're watching a highly localized danger rapidly spark a regional political firestorm that the authorities simply cannot contain.
So let's start with that localized danger. The narrative through-line begins right in a local synagogue. Let's paint the picture of this opening scene. Jesus walks into a synagogue, and there is a man with a withered hand waiting there.
Waiting.
Right, but he's not the only one waiting. The Pharisees are there too, and they are watching Jesus silently. It is a complete setup. They are setting a trap to see if he will heal on the Sabbath, so they can file formal charges against him.
Exactly.
But let me stop you right there, because if you're listening to this today, you might be wondering, why silence? Why not just confront him?
Well, the silence is the weapon itself. They aren't asking him theological questions because they aren't looking for a debate. They are acting as legal observers.
Oh, like taking notes.
Yeah, exactly. Under strict interpretations of Sabbath law, medical attention was only permitted if a life was in immediate danger. A withered hand is chronic, right? It's not life-threatening. So they are waiting for a specific legal violation to occur in plain sight to build a case.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Jesus doesn't just quietly heal the man in a corner to avoid trouble. He actively calls the man to stand up. He puts him right in the center of the room.
Right out in the open.
Yeah. And then Jesus issues this direct challenge to his silent watchers. He asks them, do good or do harm, save a life or kill. And the tension in that room must have been suffocating because they say absolutely nothing. So Jesus heals the man right there in front of everyone.
And that deliberate public action triggers the immediate fallout we see in Mark 3.6. The text says the Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him.
Wait, I need to push back on this. I get why the religious purists are mad, but why do the Herodians care? The Herodians are elite politicians backed by Rome. Why would they care about a rogue rabbi healing a guy's hand in a rural synagogue?
It's a great point.
I mean, how does that possibly threaten Rome's geopolitical stability?
That is the crucial question. And to answer it, we have to look at the historical tension between these two groups. You're right. The Herodians were political operatives. Their entire survival, wealth, and status depended on maintaining order for Rome.
Right.
Specifically, they were loyal to the tetrarch Herod Antipas, who ruled Galilee under Roman oversight. The Pharisees, on the other hand, were a grassroots purity movement.
Oh, so instead of being born into the priesthood, the Pharisees believe everyday people could achieve holiness by strictly following the law at home.
Exactly. And because of that strict Torah observance, they were intensely suspicious of Roman collaborators.
So they're essentially polar opposites, a grassroots religious movement versus state-sponsored political operatives.
Yeah, the Pharisees and the Herodians had almost nothing in common. They had mutual contempt for each other. But the Herodians care about crowd control. Any unauthorized movement that draws crowds is a threat to the peace Rome demands.
Wow, okay.
So the threat of Jesus completely overrides their mutual hatred.
It's like the FBI and a local organized crime syndicate temporarily calling a truce and pooling their resources because a new, unpredictable hacker is threatening to crash the entire city's financial grid. The mutual threat of total systemic collapse overrides decades of hatred.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. That coalition tells you something vital. Jesus is no longer being perceived as merely a religious eccentric. He is a legitimate, destabilizing threat to the established order.
So why did a single healing in a provincial synagogue make Jesus such a massive threat that bitter political enemies united to eliminate him? To understand the sheer scale of the rebellion, we have to look at the map.
Yeah, the geography is where this political alliance really starts to make terrifying sense for the local authorities, because we are looking at a massive, uncontrollable geographic scale of followers.
Right.
The text tells us Jesus withdraws to the Sea of Galilee. Geographically, this is a low basin situated roughly 60 miles north of Jerusalem. It's ringed by fishing towns and, crucially, major trade routes.
And those trade routes are the arteries connecting the Jewish heartland to Gentile territories. But let's talk about where these people are actually coming from, because the text gives us a huge list. Crowds are pouring in from Galilee, Judea, Jerusalem, and beyond the Jordan.
Right, and then the text lists Idumea. This is incredibly politically loaded.
Really?
Oh, yeah. For the listener to really grasp what Mark is doing here, we have to remember that in ancient Judea, geography was geopolitics. Idumea was the region south of Judea. Historically, it was the homeland of the Edomites. But more importantly for our context, it was the ancestral territory of the Herodian dynasty itself.
Wow. Wait, so Jesus is drawing massive crowds from the very backyard of the political operatives who are actively plotting to kill him. He's pulling people from Herod's ancestral home.
He is. And it doesn't stop there. The text also mentions massive crowds coming from Tyre and Sidon.
Which are Gentile territories, right?
Correct. These were Phoenician port cities located on the Mediterranean coast, predominantly Gentile. Just picture the cultural shock of this. You have zealous Jews from Jerusalem standing shoulder to shoulder with Phoenician Gentiles from the coast.
That's wild.
By listing these specific regions, Mark is signaling to the reader that this movement is completely ignoring traditional Jewish boundaries. Jesus is drawing from territories completely outside of Herod Antipas's jurisdiction.
It is a logistical nightmare for the authorities. It's a cross-border, unauthorized mass movement. If you're a local magistrate, you are completely out of your depth.
Absolutely.
And right in the middle of this chaos, Jesus makes a move that escalates things even further. He climbs a mountain and formally appoints an inner circle of 12 men.
What's fascinating here is the sheer symbolic weight of this appointment. For any Jewish listener in the first century, choosing exactly 12 men on a mountain isn't just picking a management team.
Right. It's bigger than that.
It is an unmistakable signal representing the 12 tribes. Jesus is creating a new organizational structure. He's essentially assembling a counter-Israel in miniature.
And he's doing it without anyone's permission. He's not running this by the religious leaders or the local magistrates. He just does it. And the roster he picks is insane. You've got guys like James and John, who Jesus gives the surname Boanerges.
Which appears in the text as an Aramaic transliteration meaning sons of thunder. It's one of those incredible moments where Mark preserves the actual spoken vernacular of the movement.
I love that detail. And then there's Simon the Zealot. Let me play devil's advocate here. How does a zealot, a label that strongly suggests violent anti-Roman national sympathies, even function in this group?
It's a very fair question.
You are mixing anti-establishment nationalists with guys who might have collaborated with the state. It is a socially combustible mix. Oh, and the text explicitly notes that Judas Iscariot is listed last.
Right. It is a deliberate, highly volatile group of people, handpicked to represent this new counter-Israel. But here's the critical pivot. Because Jesus has this massive, unsanctioned cross-border militia of followers, the local Galilean authorities are simply no longer enough to handle him.
The situation has outgrown them.
Exactly. If you're a local official and a movement gets this big, you don't handle it yourself, you call the capital.
Which means the heavy hitters are about to arrive. We find ourselves back at a house, and the scene is total chaos. The crowd is so incredibly thick that the text says they can't even eat.
Yeah.
And this massive disturbance finally draws the state establishment. Scribes from Jerusalem arrive. Now, when I hear the word scribe, I picture a guy sitting in a dimly lit room copying scrolls. Are these guys just librarians, or do they have actual police power? What are the stakes here?
It is a great question, and we really have to discard the modern image of a librarian. These scribes represent the legal religious establishment in Jerusalem. The capital city is dispatching investigators north to assess what has become a massive provincial disturbance.
So this is serious.
Very. They have traveled those 60 miles from Jerusalem to the Sea of Galilee specifically to investigate this movement.
And their assessment is brutal. They don't just say he's a false teacher. They accuse Jesus of operating by demonic power. They say he has Beelzebul.
And we have to be very careful not to read that as just a theological debate or a nasty insult. In that historical context, investigators from the capital accusing someone of performing miracles through demonic power is the equivalent of a formal charge.
Wow, okay.
They are building a dossier, It is a legal accusation that could absolutely justify severe, even fatal action against him.
So what does this all mean? How does Jesus respond to a formal charge from the Capitol's top investigators? Because he certainly doesn't back down. He issues Mark 3.29, whoever may blaspheme against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is subject to eternal condemnation.
That response is brilliantly constructed. It is the single most legally structured pronouncement in the entire chapter.
Right, he doesn't just brush it off.
No, he counters their formal accusation with a direct, logical refutation. He essentially turns the legal charge back around on them, stating that attributing the work of the Holy Spirit to a demon is the ultimate unforgivable offense.
He expertly navigates the state's legal traps and flips the courtroom on them. But here is where it gets really interesting, because Jesus beats the political alliance, and he beats the legal investigators from Jerusalem. The final and honestly the most dramatic attempt to control Jesus doesn't come from the state at all. It comes from inside his own house.
The personal threat is always the most potent and often the most dangerous.
Exactly. Let's look at Mark 3.21. The text says, when his friends heard it, they went out to seize him, for they said, he is insane. Now, some scholars believe, and the text may suggest, that the Greek word translated as friends here actually means his own household, his family.
Right.
But my question is, why do they think he's insane? What is the breaking point for them?
Think about it from a PR crisis management perspective. His family wants to stop the bleeding. They see the Pharisees and Herodians plotting to kill him. They see scribes from Jerusalem building a legal case against him.
Oh, it's all adding up.
Yeah, and now there's a chaotic mob surrounding a house where people can't even eat. They are waiting outside to seize him because they genuinely believe he has lost his grip on reality. They want to quietly take him into custody to pull him home before he does any further damage to himself or the family name.
They want to place him under house arrest to save him from the state. But Jesus doesn't go quietly. We reach the climax of the chapter in Mark 3.35. He looks at those seated around him and says, for whoever does the will of God, the same as my brother and my sister and mother.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the stakes for a first-century audience are almost impossible for us to overstate today. We live in a highly individualistic culture where you can just move away from your family and start over. But in the ancient Mediterranean world, honor, survival, and identity were entirely collective.
Yeah.
They were strictly familial.
Okay, break that down for me. Explain the actual mechanism of what it means to sever those ties in the first century. What does that social death actually look like on a Tuesday?
Well, in this world, there is no state welfare. There is no individual credit score. There is no police force you can just call if you're in trouble.
Oh, wow.
If you don't have your family's backing, you cannot secure a loan, you cannot make a trade in the marketplace. And if someone robs or wrongs you, there is no family patriarch to go to court and demand restitution. Your family was your safety net, your social security, your identity, and your only legal protection.
You were entirely defined by your bloodline.
Completely. So, for Jesus to publicly say that whoever does the will of God is his family, redefining his family right while his biological mother and brothers are standing outside, that was not just a bold theological statement, it was a kind of social death.
That is such a heavy reality to process. Social death. By cutting off his mother and brothers, Jesus is economically and legally bankrupting himself on the spot.
It left you entirely unprotected and alienated in a society that preyed on the unprotected.
And that has to be my final takeaway here. Jesus is not evading any of these threats. He is stepping directly into them. He is escalating the situation at every single turn. He systematically alienates the political elite, he alienates the religious establishment from the capital, and finally, he alienates his own blood. He embraces that social death.
He burns every single bridge of institutional and social support available to him in the first century. It was a chapter that leaves you breathless because by the end of it, he is entirely isolated in terms of earthly power.
I have to ask you, as you're listening to this right now, what would have shocked you more if you were standing in that Galilean crowd? Drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's historical drama. Would it be the unholy political alliance of the Pharisees and Herodians teaming up to kill a rabbi? Or would it be Jesus looking around at those seated and publicly choosing total social death? Let us know in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please remember to like and subscribe, and definitely check the description below for exclusive links and resources. Now that Jesus has suffered a complete social death from his family, and he has a massive target on his back from the united political elites, he is trapped in a house surrounded by an overwhelmingly massive, chaotic crowd. In the next chapter, this crushing crowd forces Jesus out of the house and right to the edge of the sea, pushing him to fundamentally change how he communicates with the masses. Will this newly formed 12-man inner circle hold together under that kind of pressure? Find out next time.